Linguistic analyst Dr. Nathan Cross had spent 3 months on Imperial Station Alpha studying the Tavrani language for trade negotiations, keeping his head down and avoiding the elaborate court ceremonies that dominated station life. He was exhausted from another sleepless night wrestling with complex grammatical structures when he was summoned to the Imperial Wing for cultural consultation, vague enough to be terrifying. He arrived disheveled, caffeinated beyond reason, and distracted by the linguistic puzzle he'd been working on. The Empress Kalira herself stood before him in the receiving hall, surrounded by advisors and guards, her long ears adorned with jewels that probably cost more than his entire education. She was beautiful in a way that made his exhausted brain hiccup, all sharp intelligence and controlled power wrapped in ceremonial robes. She asked him a question he barely registered. "Do you know who I am?" Nathan's mouth moved before his brain caught up, words tumbling out in a tone more appropriate for discussing research than addressing royalty. "The most beautiful woman I've ever seen." The hall went silent. Advisors froze mid-breath. Guards' hands moved toward weapons. Nathan's brain finally caught up to his mouth and realized he'd just called the Empress of the Tavrani Empire beautiful. Not "Your Imperial Majesty," not the eternal flame of Tavrani, just beautiful. Like she was a person instead of an institution. The Empress trembled, actually trembled, and her long ears flattened against her skull in what Nathan had learned signaled either fury or shock. Then she whispered something that sounded like confession. "No one has ever said that to me." What Nathan expected was immediate arrest or execution. What he got was far more terrifying. The Empress stepped closer, her eyes searching his face with intensity that made him want to disappear, and repeated those words. "No one has ever said that to me," like they explained everything and nothing simultaneously. The words were soft enough that only Nathan and perhaps the nearest guards heard, but they carried weight that transformed the room's atmosphere from hostile to utterly confused. The Empress's chief advisor, Lord Chancellor Vex, immediately began damage control, suggesting the human was clearly exhausted and meant no disrespect, that cultural misunderstanding should be forgiven. But the Empress silenced him with a gesture and issued an order that made Nathan's stomach drop. Dr. Cross would serve as her personal linguistic consultant for the duration of his stay, attending all formal functions where translation might be required. Nathan tried to apologize, to explain he was distracted and stupid with exhaustion, but the Empress had already turned away, leaving him in the hands of court officials who looked at him like he was either the bravest or stupidest human they'd encountered. Over the next days, Nathan learned the depth of his mistake. The Empress hadn't been called beautiful in over a decade, not since she took the throne after her father's death and became symbol rather than person. Court etiquette demanded she be addressed by title and function, never by personal qualities. Nathan's casual compliment violated protocols so fundamental that most courtiers didn't know anyone could be that reckless. The Empress tested him relentlessly. She dragged him through ceremonies where every word was weighted with political meaning, formal dinners where silence was safer than speech, public appearances where his presence beside her caused whispers that rippled through the court like tsunamis. Nathan realized she wasn't punishing him. She was testing whether his honesty was genuine or performance, whether he'd crumble under scrutiny or maintain the reckless authenticity that made him call her beautiful instead of imperial. During a particularly grueling state dinner, Duke Thuron made his move, asking publicly what qualifications a human linguistic analyst could possibly have to serve the Empress personally. It was trap designed to embarrass both Nathan and the Empress by association. Nathan could have given careful diplomatic answer, could have deferred to the Empress's judgment, could have minimized his own role. Instead, exhaustion and frustration made him honest again. "Apparently I'm qualified because I see the Empress as person before I see her as institution, which seems to be rare skill in this court." The silence was deafening. Thuron looked like he wanted Nathan executed immediately. But the Empress laughed, actual laughter that sounded rusty from disuse, and confirmed that yes, seeing her as person first was apparently revolutionary concept in court built on fear and formality. The moment shifted something. Factions began forming around Nathan's presence, some seeing him as useful tool, others viewing him as dangerous influence, and a small group who quietly appreciated anyone who made the Empress laugh after years of rigid performance. The situation reached crisis when assassination attempt targeted Nathan during a cultural festival. The attack was sophisticated enough to suggest court backing rather than external threat, and the message was clear. Remove the human disrupting carefully maintained power structures. Nathan survived only because the Empress's personal guard had been shadowing him on her orders. She'd anticipated this and protected him anyway. The assassination attempt forced everything into the open. The Empress convened emergency council meeting where she addressed the court with brutal directness about the cost of her position. She explained that for 12 years she'd been treated as symbol, as institution, as political tool by everyone including her closest advisors. She'd been called Your Imperial Majesty, the Eternal Flame, the voice of Tavrani, but no one had called her Kalira or acknowledged that beneath the crown was a person who'd forgotten what genuine connection felt like. Nathan's reckless compliment reminded her she was still person, and his continued honesty proved it wasn't performance. She announced that Dr. Cross would remain as her personal consultant with full diplomatic immunity, and anyone attempting to harm him would face her personal wrath. It was declaration that risked everything: her authority, her carefully maintained image, the political alliances she'd spent years building. Lord Chancellor Vex tried to argue that protecting the human over court stability demonstrated poor judgment, but the Empress shut him down by pointing out that court built on fear rather than respect was never truly stable. Over following weeks, Nathan and the Empress navigated impossible terrain. She taught him court etiquette and political survival, while he reminded her through small, honest moments that she was allowed to be person alongside being Empress. They developed partnership built on vulnerability she'd never permitted herself before. She admitted the loneliness of power, the exhaustion of being symbol rather than human, the terror of choosing between throne and genuine connection. Nathan admitted he was completely out of his depth, but figured being honest disaster was better than being perfect facade. Their relationship never became formally romantic. The political cost would be too high, but it became something deeper. Genuine friendship built on seeing each other truly. In quiet moments between political storms, usually in the Empress's private library where courtiers couldn't reach them, they talked about the cost of honesty, the weight of crowns, and the strange mercy of being seen truly by someone who had nothing to gain from pretending. The Empress admitted that Nathan's exhausted compliment changed her reign more than any policy, because it reminded her that power without personhood was just elaborate prison. Nathan